Hello! In this video, we're going to focus on how to draw in Moho. I'm going to show you how to import your artwork and how to vectorize it for rigging and animation. Oh, and for those of you who don't know, a vector is a computerized line. This means we can manipulate a vector shape using points without running the risk of ruining the shape's quality. Majority of your drawings will be vectored when animating in Moho. Working in vectors does take some practice, but once you figure it out, drawing in Moho becomes a breeze. In this example, we're going to start from the very beginning. So I have Moho Debut opened, but I don't have any projects opened at the moment, so we're going to create one. So to do this, we're going to go to the Files tab and select New. And now that I have a new project created, I now want to save my project so I won't lose any of the work I'm about to do. So go back to the Files tab and select Save. And in the pop-up, I'm going to select where I want my project to be saved. And now I'm going to name my project Cute Flower, and I'm going to select OK to save my project. Next, we want to change our project settings. And remember that we always want to do this before we start animating or drawing. If we do this halfway through an animation or a drawing, then you will need to rescale everything. So if you remember from the last video, to change your project settings, you need to go to Files and select Project Settings. Now I'm going to set this project to 900 by 900 pixels. And I'm going to leave the frame rate as 24 frames per second. I also want my project itself to be 10 seconds long. So if my frame rate is 24 frames per second, I need to calculate how many frames would it be for 10 seconds. So that would be 10 seconds times 24 frames per second, which gives me a total of 240 frames. And right now my project is already set to 240 frames, so I'm going to leave the start and end frame as it is. Then I'm going to select OK to finalize all the changes I just did. And as you can see, the resolution of my project has changed, and now I can start drawing. When working in Moho, I highly recommend you draw from an image, because this allows you to get a clearer idea of what you want your project to look like. So, for example, for this project, I know I want to animate a dancing flower, and I could technically draw it from scratch, but that would leave me with a lot of open-ended questions. What kind of flower am I animating? Is it a rose or is it a daisy? Am I just drawing a flower, or is there a background I need to draw as well? See, there's so many questions. But if I take the time to draw out my project, it suddenly becomes much clearer. So here's the reference sketch I made for this project. And by the way, this image is available in the description of this video if you want to follow along. And you don't have to use a fancy drawing program. If you wanted to, you can draw your reference sketch on a blank sheet of paper and take a picture of it on your phone and use that as your reference image. That works as well. You don't have to get too complicated with your reference sketch. But see, now I know that I'm drawing a daisy, and it has a happy face, which was not in my original idea. This project is also going to need a background as well. So now that I have a better idea of what my project actually looks like, I can now import this image into my project for reference by going to the Files tab and then going to Import and then selecting General Import. From here, I'm going to select the picture I want to import, which is this image called Cute Flower Sketch. And I'm going to select Open to import the picture. And now, as you can see, the picture has been added to my canvas, and it has also been added to my layers panel. So if you look at the layers panel, we can see that we have two layers. Layer 1, which is a vector layer, and Cute Flower Sketch JPEG, which we just imported. Now, let's look at these two layers. Notice how they have two separate icons next to their names? These icons represent what kind of layer the layer is. So this picture icon next to Cute Flower Sketch is letting us know that it's an image, and this bean looking icon next to layer 1 is letting us know that it's a vector layer. If you're having a hard time identifying layer types, then you can right click on name in the layers panel, and in the drop down menu select kind. This column will list the layer type, and you can reorder how the layer panel lists information by clicking and dragging a category. So I'm going to click and drag the kind category so that it's in front of the layer's name. And really quick, these eyes next to each layer controls whether or not the layer is visible. So if I disable the visibility on Cute Flower Sketch, it's no longer visible on my canvas. But if I click it again, it comes back and it's now visible. So now that we have our picture imported and we explored the layers panel a bit, we are now ready to start drawing our picture for rigging. This is a bit different from regular drawing because it requires some planning beforehand. So for a second, let's just look at the flower character we're about to draw. Ignore the background. If you look at where the stem attaches to the petals, we can see that the stem is behind the petals. We can't see where the stem attaches to the flower itself. If we were to draw our stem exactly like this image, when the petals move, we're going to see that the stem is not connected to the flower. So for rigging, we actually need to draw the hidden portion of the stem so we won't have this problem. The best way to achieve this is to break apart our character into separate layers. So we need to identify what we want to animate our character doing. So I want this flower character to sway left and right like it's dancing. And I also want these petals and leaves to bounce a little bit when my character moves. So I will need to separate the petals and leaves from the stem so they can move individually. A good rule to keep in mind is that if it's going to move on its own, it should be on its own layer. So using this logic, we're going to break apart this character into 4 separate layers. The first layer I want to add would be the leaves, and then it would be the stem, then the petals, and lastly, I would have the character's face. So now that we have our character broken up into layers, we're now going to create these 4 layers in the Layers panel. So in the Layers panel, select the Add Layer icon and select Vector to add a new vector layer. We're going to call this layer Leaves. Now we're going to add another by going back to the Add Layer button and selecting Vector again, and we're going to call this layer Stem. And we're going to do this again, and we're going to call this layer Petals. And lastly, we're going to add our 4th and final layer, and we're going to call it Face. So now that we have our stem, leaves, petals, and face layer, and we don't need layer 1, so I'm going to go ahead and select it and delete it. We'll come back to the Layers panel and add some more layers for the clouds and sun and grass, but for now we're just going to focus on creating our flower character. Also, remember that we want to draw on frame 0. Moho will not let you draw on any other frame. Another thing you need to know when drawing is that drawing using a mouse is much easier and better than using a trackpad. So if you're using a laptop, then I would highly recommend you switch to a mouse if you have one handy. The second thing you need to know is how to navigate the canvas. So to move your canvas around, you're going to hold down the right button on your mouse, and this will allow you to pan around your canvas. Next, I'm going to show you how to zoom in and out of the canvas. So first, point to where you want to zoom in and out of, and then use the scroll wheel on your mouse to zoom in and out of this area. Lastly, to recenter the canvas, all you need to do is push the home button on your keyboard. So now that we know how to navigate the canvas, we can finally get started. And I'm going to start this drawing by starting on the face layer, and then I'm going to work my way down. So to get started, I'm going to select the face layer to draw on it. And I know I have the face layer selected because it's currently highlighted. Now I'm going to use the drawing tools available to start creating my character. If you notice, some of the drawing tools are unavailable at the moment. This is because those particular tools require that a vector to be drawn on the layer before you can use it. And at the moment, there's nothing on this layer, we just created it. Another note about the tools in Moho is that they're designed to do one thing. So for example, the Draw Shapes tool, just knowing its name, we can assume that its main purpose is to, well, draw shapes. It's literally that straightforward. And I recommend that you use the Draw Shapes tool to get started because it's much easier to manipulate a shape than it is to create a shape from scratch as a beginner. Now, when I select the Draw Shapes tool, notice that this top panel has now changed. This top panel right here is the Tools options, and this will change depending on what tool you have selected. So because I currently have the Draw Shapes tool selected, I can draw all these shapes with this one tool. I could draw a rectangle, a circle, a triangle, a star, etc. So I just need to select these shapes from the options. So let's say I want to draw a star. I would select the star icon and click and drag the left mouse button to create this shape. And autofill and autostroke are the colors of the shape. So since both autofill and autostroke are on, the shape we drew has both a fill and a stroke. And the stroke, by the way, is the outline of the shape. And if we look at the Styles panel, we can see what colors the shape is going to be. So right now the fill is set to pink and the stroke is set to blue. If we wanted to change the color of the fill or stroke, we will select these color boxes. Change the color before we create the shape. So if I change the fill to a green color, the next shape I create will have a green fill and a blue stroke. Now if I don't want my shape to have a stroke, then I can turn off auto stroke and the next shape I draw will have no stroke. Same thing with autofill. If I turn auto stroke back on and turn off autofill, then the next shape I draw will just be an outline. But if I turn off both auto stroke and autofill, then the next shape I'm going to create will just be the vector points, which will not be visible in the animation. So if I select Ctrl R to render an image of my project, we can see that the shape that has no stroke or fill is not visible. But we don't need all these shapes for this character, so I'm going to go ahead and delete all these shapes by using the Select Points tool. I'm going to make sure lasso is on and I'm going to click and drag around my shapes to select all of them. And once I get them all selected, I'm going to select the delete key on my keyboard to get rid of them. The first thing I want to do is I want to draw the character's eyes. So I'm going to use the Draw Shapes tool to do this. And these eyes are circular, so I'm going to use the oval option. And just like how I created the star, I'm going to click and drag the left mouse button to create my shape. I can also constrain the shape by holding the Shift key to create a perfect circle, or I can hold down the Alt key to draw a shape from the center. I want to create a perfect circle, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key and I'm going to release the left mouse button once I got the shape to the correct size. And I didn't really draw the eye in the exact location of my drawing. I could technically delete the shape and try again, but there is a way to fix this. All I need to do is select the Transform Points tool, which, judging by its name, it will transform the location of my points. You can use this tool to select these points on the shape to edit the shape and its location. If I wanted to, I can select each of these points individually and drag them to match my picture. So if I click on a point, and when it becomes highlighted, it's letting me know that it's selected, I can click and drag the point to move it. I can also select all of the points on this shape and move it as one unit. So I'm going to undo what I just did to get my original shape back. Now if I select in the middle of the shape, I automatically select all the points on the shape. Now I can drag the entire shape around as one unit. And now I'm just going to move this circle so it matches my drawing. To deselect the points, I'm just going to select anywhere else on my canvas. And by the way, selecting the escape key on your keyboard would also deselect the points as well. Now I'm going to create the blush for this character. So I'm going to select the Draw Shapes tool again and use the oval option again to create this shape. So I'm going to click and drag the shape, and I'm actually going to draw this shape from the center, so I'm going to hold down the Alt key on my keyboard. And again, my shape is a bit off, so I'm going to go back to the Transform Points tool, click on my shape, and move it so it's now in the correct location. And dang it, I forgot to change the colors of this shape before I drew it, but this doesn't mean I need to delete the shape and start over. Instead, I'm going to change the color of this shape to pink by going to the Select Shapes tool. And I'm going to select the shape, and you can tell that it's selected because it has this checkerboard pattern. This is just Moho letting us know that the shape is currently selected. And now I'm going to use the Style panel to edit the colors of this shape. So if we look at the Styles panel, we can see that both Fill and Stroke are checked. Now I want to change the color of both of these. So I'm going to select the color box and change them. So for Fill, I'm going to change it to a light pink. And for Stroke, I'm going to change it to a red color. And also for Stroke, I want to decrease the width of my stroke so it's not so thick. And for my second eye and blush, instead of creating a new shape and transforming the points, I'm instead going to use a shortcut. I'm going to copy and paste the shapes I just created. So to do this, I'm going to use the Select Points tool, and I'm going to make sure that lasso is enabled. Then I'm going to click and drag around my points to select both shapes. Then I'm going to go to the Transform Points tool, and I'm going to press Ctrl C and Ctrl V on my keyboard. Now it doesn't look like anything happened, but once I try to move my shape, have now been duplicated. And I'm going to use the horizontal flip options to flip both shapes. And now I'm just going to move these shapes so they match my picture.